Welcome to this episode of Forgiving the Girl Inside, a Matter of the Heart. Today we have the beautiful Molly Mandelberg, who is the founder of Wild Hearts Rise Up. Sometimes my brain just doesn't work. And as you all know, we don't do edits here because we mess up, right? That's what life is all about. And when we mess up, we need to show forgiveness. And it's so important. And a lot of times when we need to forgive ourselves, we're not as full of grace as we are when we need to forgive someone else, unless that someone else just really created a moment in our lives that was so impactful that we harbor this unforgiveness towards them. In many relationships, whether it be at work, in a love relationship, a mother-daughter, father-daughter relationship, or what have you, a lot of times people will cross those boundaries and become abusive verbally, physically, emotionally. And a lot of those things aren't talked about. But today, Molly's going to share her story of forgiveness about her abuser. So thank you so much, Molly, for sharing this space with me and my audience. Tell us, what was it like? Just give us a little bit of background about what life was like before you entered into this relationship, and then kind of go into how you got into this abusive relationship.
Yeah, I mean, there's been two main emotionally abusive relationships in my life. And the first one started when I was a little kid and my mom remarried probably maybe too quickly because it was her high school sweetheart that she had fallen back in love with. And he was a raging alcoholic and very verbally abusive. And it sort of took a little while to catch on what was really happening. And as a 6-year-old, you don't really have a say in who your mom marries or whatever. So there were 9 years of growing up between 6 and 14, 15 that this man was in my life. And those are pretty formative years where you're really kind of trying to figure out where you stand in the world and who you are and what your value is. And so to have that kind of emotional abuse in those formative years, I had a lot of things that I made true about me that weren't actually true, that weren't actually who I really am. And what's unfortunate about that is those truths, when we live into them and we become adults and we start living our lives, walking around the world as if you don't matter, or as if you have to prove your worth in order to receive love. Those are some things that can really stick you in all of your relationships moving forward. And probably most people listening to this understand that the truths we walk through in life, we tend to find people and situations to reaffirm that. So most relationships that I had gotten into before doing some of the heavy lifting healing work that I've done were really not necessarily emotionally abusive, but they were with people who would affirm that my value was lacking, or that my worth needed to be proven, or that, I'm incapable of love or being loved. And so a lot of healing work had to happen for me to just recover from that kind of childhood. And the forgiveness part actually came long after that man was out of my life, but also after he happened to pass away, probably from alcohol abuse. And I sort of recognized that I had been carrying all this stuff. I'd been carrying my anger towards him, my grief of the childhood that could have been without such a man in my life, and lots of resentment and fears and stories that I was doing the work to carry around. It's like that picture of someone carrying all the luggage. It's optional. You can actually learn how to set all that baggage down and figure out who you are after the fact. So I had a really powerful breakthrough experience at a workshop that I was at, where I recognized that I'm no longer being hunted or abused actively at that point in my life, and that I have grown and have since grown a lot more since, so much from rising from that trauma, rising from that abuse, rising from who I thought I was into who I knew I was becoming. And that was actually a contribution that maybe wouldn't have been in my life, that sort of upswing after trauma and abuse, that wouldn't have been in my life had I not had that abuser. So even though I didn't have a choice in him coming into my life, I had a choice in how I lived on beyond that. And it was easier to sort of have that resolution knowing he wasn't in a body on this earth anymore. I couldn't run into him at REI or get friended by him on Facebook, which both had happened in the years after their divorce. And that I sort of made this little internal like moment where I chose to forgive him. I chose to forgive myself for choosing to come into a life where that kind of trauma would happen. And I also had a little, I'm going to get emotional about it, but conversation with my inner child where I got to tell her that I have her back, that I'm not going to put her in a situation like that again, that I have enough awareness now as the adult that I've become to see a situation like that and get her out of it. So there was sort of like a coming back to myself. There was sort of, I think, a moment in my childhood, probably many moments where I chose to go out of my body. And I think that's really normal for people who go through trauma and abuse, that a part of you sort of walks out because it's too much to process. It's too much to handle. And so that was sort of a inviting myself back and sort of a soul reclamation process to just remind myself and to let myself know that I'm safe, and sort of to have the self-forgiveness of, even though that happened, you're allowed to be whole. You're allowed to be complete now. You're allowed to be cared for and loved. And it's okay to let people love you. It's actually most of the time safe to let people love you, that most people aren't going to harm you if you let them into your lives. And my relationships have gotten so much deeper since that. My awareness about, you know, what's for me, what relationships to invest in and what relationships to get out of has dramatically changed. And I have found myself in a relationship with a very similar kind of archetype to my stepfather more recently. And it was due to that work, I think, that willingness to look at what had happened and what components of that were mine, and what about this new relationship felt really familiar, that I was able to see that this isn't going to change. This isn't going to turn into something that actually works for me. And to honor that inner child, to keep my promise to her, I had to leave. There was a lot of beauty and magic and love in that relationship. And there was also a lot of places where that little girl was not being cared for. And that was my job to take a stand for her and get the fuck out. Excuse my French.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. And to recognize that and to be able to work through that, that's a lot of hard work that you did connecting with your inner child. And there's a door, it's called DID. I can't remember what it stands for at the moment. It's very common for women, well, anyone who's gone through trauma, especially at a young age, and disidentity order. But you actually create different personalities from the situations to protect yourself. And like you said, it's like this out of body experience. You almost go away so that you're numb to what's happening to your physical being during this abuse. And then once it's over, you kind of like just ignore it, kind of, go through it. And then, it can manifest itself in so many different ways, and, your different relationships, your jobs, and the choices that you make. So to be able to connect with your inner child and go through and go back with her to your younger self and say, look, I got you, because there's that part of you. And if you can imagine just the little girl cowering in the corner, that I don't know. And, it's amazing when we listen to our intuition, when you're connected with somebody, you get these signs. And a lot of times we ignore it because we want to trust. We want to be able to trust that this is going to be good. And there's so many positives, and let's look for the good in this circumstance. But like you said, you had to, even though there was a lot of good, there's still that bad. And if you weren't taken care of, so the bravery that you had to be able to walk away, the good and the bad, what do you think? Like, so did you have like a picture in your mind to help you? Because it's very difficult for women, especially, to walk away from a relationship. I mean, I'm sure men have the same experience, but our audience is mostly women. So if you think about even like what was going on with not recent with I'm so not recalling things today. In the social media, the big actor that did Caribbean, Pirates of the
Johnny Depp.
Thank you. I love Johnny Depp, but he went through this huge thing all over social media about his relationship and the abuse and all of that and how it's disguised. And so a lot of times people will be like, well, maybe it'll get better. Maybe I'll just do it. Maybe if we go to counseling, maybe if we do that. So what can you share with our audience, a tool or something that they could do to help recognize that, yeah, they might need support, they might need something that was like that pivotal point to say, no, I recognize this relationship and I am not moving forward and I'm getting out.
Yeah. I mean, there are two big things that helped me. One is resourcing myself with a lot of support. I was calling my friends who are therapists. I have a regular facilitation through a modality that I love called Access Consciousness. My Access facilitator's name is Cassie Summers. I was meeting with her every 2 weeks. That's my version of consistent regular therapy. I was having healing sessions. I was having intuitive spiritual guidance sessions. I was having like shamanic ceremonies, like all kinds of inner work I was doing, because that's who I am. I do the heavy lifting of the inner work because it turns me on and it brings me more awareness. And then I'm also a dedicated journaler. I write every morning before I get out of bed, and I write every night before I fall asleep. And that served as a pattern recognition tool for me. And I think if you don't have a practice like that, for one, you could start one. Just write down your thoughts, write down what's happening, write down how you feel about it. Ask yourself questions to see, is this working for me? What could I do or be that could make this work better? Or is this beyond making better at this point? And it was hard to get out. It was hard to convince myself that I was willing to lose the beautiful parts of that relationship just to get myself free of the parts that were emotionally exhausting. It was hard to convince myself that I couldn't fix it or change it by improving myself, because that's sort of a place I stand, is I can change anything in my life by putting my attention on it and seeing what I can create inside of it. And then there's a breaking point at which you recognize that it takes two to tango in that game. And if somebody's not going to meet you there, to do the work, to evolve, to change, to get real about what's going on, to get real about what's working and not working, then that may or may not be a place you want to stay. And it took a while for me coming to that place again and again. And thankfully I had that regular support, that consistent sort of sounding board of the people in my life that I was leaning on for emotional support and energetic support, to keep reminding me of like, hey, we've come to this point a few times. Like there was one moment where somebody actually just said, shit or get off the pot. And I was like, I am someone who shits or gets off the pot. That's who I am. I don't sit around and not make a decision that I know I need to make. And then it became a sort of debate of how to do it best, because I didn't want to leave in a fury and a huff I didn't want to get to a bad point and like leave in anger. And so this particular relationship, we ended up having like a really beautiful month of travel. We went and saw our favorite band like 8 times in the span of 10 days, which was insane. I'm definitely too old to do that kind of band chasing so much anymore. But we had such a beautiful time, and we're deeply in love. It was honestly the best month of our entire relationship. And I didn't allow that to change my mind about what I knew needed to happen, because I knew that that wasn't a sign of him changing into someone who's going to do this work for me. We even went to counseling once. We had he's in a psychology program trying to be a therapist. Like we tried to have as many good conversations, but once I knew it wasn't going to ever meet me on the level I want to be met with in partnership, there was clarity. There was a knowing that it had to end, and I had to be the one to find a way to end it. And I did that as gently as I could. And we tried to stay friends and stay connected until I got enough space from the relationship that I recognized that's not going to work for me either. That's really an unhealthy place for me to stay connected to this person who causes me that much emotional harm. So then I had to sever it, and that was leaving in a little bit more of an anger situation. And that's what I needed to actually find closure with. That was to come to a place of, no, this really cannot be a part of my life. And like, I love you so much, but you can't stay. I basically very explicitly uninvited him from my life. And that still takes a process of healing. It's not a fast of like, oh, I did this and now boom, here I am in my happy life. It's like you still have to grieve the process of releasing this thing that you had future visions about. You had like so much beauty come out of it in certain moments, and you grieve the loss of that, I think, and that looks different for every different person. But it doesn't mean it was the wrong choice. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be better off through afterwards. And there have been many breakups in my life where I rapidly evolved after the fact. So there was a part of me that knew the whole time in this relationship, you know what, if it does end, I can't wait to see who I become after this one, because this was a big one.
Yeah.
And that was a good outlook to have, I think, through the relationship of not only will I be fine, I will be a better version of myself from recovering and healing after this.
I love that perspective. Like, I can't wait for the next chapter. Like, this is what I've learned. This is how much I've grown. And so many of us don't even reflect on that. Like when we, instead of grieving the loss and seeing what we can learn from it, we just wallow in it and get depressed and, angry and frustrated and play the blame game and get involved in all the drama. So it's so beautiful that you came to that place to say, yeah, no, this is perfect. This is exactly what I need. So I love that. And, it is, even though you have the tools implemented, you're still going through the emotions, you're still experiencing them. And, it's not like you're just, oh, nope, this is it. It's not a checklist that you make. So it's
yeah. And feeling those emotions is a really pivotal part of it. I had one really tangible experience of that, if you want me to share.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was driving through the redwoods and I was on my way to showcase my oracle deck at a music festival. So I have this oracle deck that I made that is a bunch of really beautiful magic. And one of my friends was organizing the art like ambiance at this event, and she invited me to come and showcase my oracle deck. So I'm driving down, I'm like on the way to do this beautiful thing, to see my favorite band and be part of the show in some way. And he was going to be there, this recent ex of mine. And I found out on the way down that he was definitely going to be there, and he was bringing a date with the ticket that I had purchased that I no longer needed. And so I was like, okay, the friend who told me that, I immediately texted her commencing self-care now, as I'm on my way a couple days away from this event. And I decided I'm just going to feel everything that I'm feeling right now, which is usually I'm like, okay, like old self would push it down, pretend you're okay, like rise above, like be your powerful, potent self. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to feel everything that I feel about this right now. And I turned the music up. It was a beautiful song. It's called Joyful Man by an artist that starts with an M. I highly recommend this song. It's a very healing magic song. But I turned it up and I went through anger. I went through grief and sadness. I cried. I screamed. And this is all in the span of like 3 minutes. And I got through those like list of normal reactions, and I got to laughter. I got somehow moved enough energy that I got to a place of joy. And I got that somehow the universe had given me this experience a few days ahead where I had a really clear choice, where I could choose petty and in my ego, and what am I going to snarky say to them if I meet them, or I could choose this higher path of who I actually want to become. And it was something I've been sort of calling in for months before that, was the energy of what I call the Empress of Empowerment. It's generous, it's creative, it's like a matriarch of power. And it's sort of an unfuckwithable force. And so I recognized that, oh my gosh, like all these circumstances had to perfectly align for me to have this choice of which track I want to be on. And I get to spend the whole weekend choosing that track. Do I want to be the old ego self that's hurt and broken? Or do I want to be the one who's risen from this and who can react and interact with these people, him and his date, from a place of like higher self consciousness, of like being in my power, and not to say being unfazed by the situation, but being the woman that I want to be in that moment. And
Mhm.
somehow I managed to have that interaction where I gave him a hug. I gave him some stuff that he had left with me. I met her, shook her hand, said, I hope you have a really great weekend, and was exactly who I wanted to be in that moment. And I think that was only possible because I allowed all the emotions to come out first. I wasn't trying to contain them or throttle them. I was willing to like feel them and be with them and have compassion for myself in all those feelings as they arose. And that created the possibility of something greater happening afterwards, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. And it just establishes those healthy boundaries that lead to healthier relationships. And I always tell my audience, draw a circle, stand in it. You are the only one that can change. You're the only one that can create your own feelings, your own path. And you can't control what anyone else does. It's just impossible because they have to choose it for themselves. And when two people are in a relationship together, they have to, it's give and take. It's a mutual reciprocity of energy so that you can have this wonderful relationship with healthy boundaries and understand and communicate in a way that's loving and kind, because there's no reason to be abusive. I mean, just, hurt people, hurt others. And it's like, why do you want to stay stuck? And my one friend was talking about, I just want to shake them. Like, they're so stupid. I just want to shake them.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not doing this right. Like, why do you want to spend all this negative energy? What does it serve? It does not serve in any way whatsoever to be so negative and attacking. You can do so much more from a loving, heart-centered heart than you can from anger and bitterness, and to showcase that. And they were probably taken back a little bit, I would imagine. Like, who is this person and why is she acting that way? That's amazing. So tell us, so you got into coaching. So tell us a little bit about your program.
Yeah, so I work with primarily coaches and holistic practitioners, people who trade in wisdom and guidance and who run service-based businesses. So usually I'm working with people who have a one-on-one client business already, and they want to expand into courses and programs and building their email list and setting up platforms to allow them to sell their programs and lead workshops or webinars or build some sort of an online presence so that it's easier to launch the offerings that they're creating.
Mhm.
And I help them with all aspects of that, the technology, the copywriting, the content development, the project management. And then also as I grew my own business and as I worked with many, many clients over the years, I noticed that there was a missing piece. And it was, funnily enough, the piece that I had started my business with in the first place, which was more about healing. When I started my business, I was a hypnotherapist and looking a lot at what are our limitations, what are our blocks, what are the stories that we're carrying around subconsciously that are keeping us from having the life we want, keeping us from getting the results we want, or actualizing the things we desire into our lives. And so I started bringing back in that more spiritual, energetic aspect to my work, which is looking at, okay, we're launching this program, or we did launch this program and it didn't get the results we want, or we're hesitating to even create this thing in the first place, even though we so want to make it happen and see it come into the world. What's that?
Mhm.
What's that energetic piece that needs to come into alignment, and how can we sync ourselves up energetically so that our magnets are all the way the fuck on, so that when we put something out into the world, there is no barrier around it, that it is simply able to be seen and found, and to build that momentum and traction that everybody who's building this kind of business wants, so that they can have the impact on the planet and the change in people's lives that they desire to have. So my work is a synthesis of those two. My biggest program is called Magic, which is Magnetic Influencer Collective. I have a course called Peace with Money, which is all about using that kind of energy magic on our finances and how we're relating to the entity of money in our lives and communing with it and making friends with it and allowing it to come and hang out with us. And yeah, I really enjoy getting to talk on both levels. A client call with me can range from actually nitty gritty, setting up an email sequence and understanding how it works, or setting up an SOP so that we have a system of operations for handing off a task to a virtual assistant in the future, and then immediately shift over to what we're manifesting and like removing those inner blocks to allowing more to come to us and have more ease and joy and glory in our lives.
Yeah, that's a lot of deep work.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
absolutely Amazing. Wow. Well, thank you. What's the best way for people to get to connect with you?
Yeah, I have a website, Wild Hearts with an S, riseup.com, wildheartsriseup.com. And on there, you'll find like a whole list of free things you can get from me. There's 2 podcasts. I have 2 books out. And I'd love to, I don't often offer free consults or free introductory calls anymore, but I would happily offer anyone in your audience, if you are a coach or a healer, if you know you have something bigger you want to create and share with the world, you already see clients, but you're ready to take that to the next level, I'd be happy to invite you to a 30-minute call with me for free, a Reach Your People with Ease strategy session. And the link for that is wildheartsriseup.com/strategy.
Awesome. And we'll get those links in the show notes so that our audience can access them and book your call, especially, if you are at that point in your life where you're ready to take the next step and it's just right there, but you can't quite figure it out. Don't try to do it on your own. It'll take forever. You can Google it, yes, but working with an expert like Molly is going to help you get there so much faster. And what does it look like when you get there faster versus later, right?
Yes, yeah.
When do
Save
you want
that
to
time.
reach those goals? Do you want to do it now or, maybe 2 years from now? Think
Yeah.
about the time frames. So thank you so much, Molly, for sharing your story and your expertise with us. And just for being here and offering the free session. That's amazing. So 30-minute free session with Molly. Check the show notes for the link and reserve your spot. When will the offer be good through? Because this will be everlasting on YouTube and my podcast.
We can just say it's good through whenever someone's listening. If they click the link and it happens to not be free anymore, then it's probably further in the future than this episode was meant to go. But yeah, that offer is valid.
Awesome. Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you
And
so much.
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, and thank you, everyone. If you enjoyed the show, please comment, leave a review, give us a rating, and share it with someone that could benefit from it, especially the relationship segment. The meat of the story, someone's story of forgiving another person is so impactful. When we share our stories, we help others. So if you know someone that would benefit from Molly's story, please share this episode with them. And remember, mindset, it's the crux of all that we do. It's a matter of the heart.